A millionaire pays a homeless woman to have his baby, but when the child is born, he's shocked by what he sees. Can money really buy family? When the world's coldest businessman strikes a deal with a desperate artist living on the streets, neither expects how life will completely transform them both. Some things can't be controlled even by the richest man in town. Where are you watching from? Comment your city below. This story will challenge everything you believe about love, power, and second chances. The greatest wealth isn't in your bank account. It's where you least expect to find it. Subscribe now and hit that like button to discover how the most calculated plan can lead to the most unexpected miracle. Michael Johnson stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, 60 floors above the bustling city that he had conquered, yet felt no connection to. Rain streaked down the glass, distorting the view of skyscrapers that seemed to bow before the Johnson Financial Tower. The muted thunder outside mirrored the storm brewing within him as he stared at the document on his Italian marble desk. "The test results are conclusive, Mr. Johnson," Dr. Patterson had said earlier that day. "Your chances of fathering a child naturally are extremely low due to your condition." Michael's fingers tightened around the crystal tumbler of scotch, the amber liquid catching the low light from his desk lamp. At 42, he had everything money could buy. A financial empire spanning continents, properties in 7 countries, a fleet of luxury vehicles, and enough wealth to last several lifetimes. Yet the empire had no heir, no continuation of the Johnson legacy that his grandfather had started, with nothing but calloused hands and unwavering determination. The rain intensified, droplets hammering against the glass like desperate fingers trying to reach him. Michael inhaled the rich aroma of his 30-year-old scotch, feeling the familiar burn as he took a sip. The warmth spread through his chest, but failed to reach the cold void that had been growing since his second divorce 3 years ago. "Sir?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The board members are waiting in the conference room." "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes," Michael replied, his voice betraying none of the turmoil within. He straightened his custom-tailored suit and adjusted his platinum cufflinks, gifts to himself after his first billion. His reflection in the window showed what everyone else saw, a powerful man with salt-and-pepper hair, perfectly styled, jawline still strong despite his age, eyes sharp and calculating. What no one saw was the emptiness behind those eyes, the hollow feeling that all of this, the wealth, the power, the respect, would disappear when he was gone, with no one to carry it forward. Love had proven to be a disappointment. 2 failed. Marriages had taught him that people were ultimately after his wealth or status. Relationships were transactional. He had accepted this truth years ago. But a child was different. A child was legacy, continuation, purpose. A child could be molded, taught the values of hard work and determination that had built the Johnson Empire. As raindrops raced down the window, a plan began to form in Michael's mind. If nature and conventional methods wouldn't provide him with an heir, perhaps it was time to approach the problem like any other business deal. Identify the need, find a suitable candidate, and make an offer that couldn't be refused. "Sir?" The intercom buzzed again. "They're getting impatient." Michael drained his glass and set it down with a decisive clink. "I'm coming." He walked to the conference room with renewed purpose, the hollow feeling temporarily filled with determination. He would find a solution. After all, Michael Johnson always got what he wanted. 1 week after his doctor's appointment, Michael was driving his Aston Martin through the Arts District, taking the long route to his office to clear his mind. The morning was bright, a stark contrast to the stormy night when he had first conceived his plan. He had instructed his team of lawyers to prepare documents, had consulted with specialists, but he still hadn't found the right candidate. That's when he saw her. She sat cross-legged on the sidewalk outside an upscale gallery, intensely focused on a sketch pad balanced on her knees. Her clothes were worn but clean, faded jeans with artistic patches, a threadbare sweater despite the morning chill. Long brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, revealing high cheekbones and a determined set to her jaw. What caught Michael's attention, however, were her eyes, startlingly blue and completely absorbed in her work. Almost against his will, Michael pulled the car over and observed her for a moment. She was young, mid-20s perhaps, and though her circumstances seemed humble, there was a dignity in her posture, a quiet confidence in the way her hand moved across the paper. Occasionally, pedestrians would drop coins into an upturned hat beside her, but most passed by without a glance. Impulsively, Michael stepped out of his car, ignoring the surprised looks from passers-by who recognized either him or the value of his vehicle. As he approached, he could see that she was drawing the gallery building with remarkable skill, capturing details that most would overlook. "That's quite impressive," he said, standing over her. The young woman didn't look up immediately. When she did, her blue eyes were wary but not intimidated. "Thank you," she replied simply, then returned to her drawing. Michael wasn't used to being dismissed so easily. "Do you sell your work?" Now she gave him her full attention, assessing him from expensive shoes to tailored suit. "Sometimes. Are you interested in buying this one?" "Perhaps. What's your name?" "Sarah. Sarah Williams." She hesitated before asking, "And you are?" "Michael Johnson." Recognition flickered in her eyes. His name was well known in the city, but she showed none of the typical responses. No sudden interest, no calculating smile, just a slight nod. "Well, Mr. Johnson, this one will be $50 when it's finished." Michael almost laughed at the modest sum. Instead, he said, "I have a different proposal. Would you join me for coffee? There's a cafe around the corner." Sarah frowned, suspicion replacing her professional demeanor. "I don't think so. I assure you, Ms. Williams, this is a business proposal, one that could be very beneficial to you." He glanced meaningfully at her worn shoes and the small backpack beside her that seemed to contain all her possessions. 15 minutes of your time in a public place, that's all I ask." Something in his tone, perhaps the sincerity or the business-like approach, made her pause. After a moment's consideration, she closed her sketchbook and stood up. 15 minutes, she agreed, picking up her hat with its meager earnings and her backpack, "and I choose the cafe." Michael nodded, admiring her caution. They walked in silence to a small, busy coffee shop where Sarah seemed known to the staff. After they were seated with their drinks, an elaborate latte for her and black coffee for him, Michael came directly to the point. "Ms. Williams, I've been looking for someone with certain qualities, and I believe you might be suitable. I'm prepared to make you an offer that would completely change your circumstances." Sarah took a sip of her latte, leaving a small foam mustache that she quickly wiped away. "What kind of offer?" "I need an heir," Michael stated plainly, "and I'm looking for someone to provide that for me." Sarah's blue eyes widened, and for the first time, Michael saw her composure crack. "Excuse me? I'm offering you a contract. You would carry a child, my child, and in return you would receive financial compensation that would ensure you never have to sit on a sidewalk again." The cafe sounds seemed to fade as Sarah stared at him, trying to determine if he was serious. "You want me to have your baby? For money?" "Put simply, yes. All your needs would be met during the pregnancy. The best medical care, comfortable living arrangements, anything you require. After delivery, you would receive a sum substantial enough to change your life completely. And the baby would be mine exclusively. Your obligation would end at birth." Sarah set down her cup with a shaking hand. "This is insane. You're insane. This is business, Ms. Williams, a transaction beneficial to both parties. I get what I need, an heir. You get what you need, financial security. Why me? There must be thousands of women who would—" "You have qualities I admire," Michael interrupted. "You're talented, determined, intelligent. I've been observing you. You maintain dignity despite your circumstances. You're healthy with no signs of addiction issues, and frankly, your genetic attributes would complement mine well." Sarah looked both offended and intrigued, emotions battling across her expressive face. Finally, she stood up, gathering her belongings. "Your 15 minutes are up, Mr. Johnson, and your proposal is outrageous." Michael remained seated, reaching into his jacket to withdraw a business card. "Think about it, Ms. Williams. My number is on the card. Call me within 24 hours if you're interested. After that, the offer expires." She hesitated before taking the card, then walked out without another word. Michael watched her go, admiring the straight line of her back, the proud tilt of her chin. She was perfect for what he needed. Now he just had to wait and see if desperation would overcome indignation. He finished his coffee slowly, already planning the next steps should she accept. When he left the cafe, he placed $100 bill in the tip jar, earning a gasp from the barista. Small investments sometimes yielded the greatest returns. Sarah stood under the hot spray of the public shower at the community center, allowing herself the luxury of 5 extra minutes as she contemplated Michael Johnson's outrageous proposal. The card he had given her was tucked safely in her backpack, its embossed lettering and heavyweight stock a tangible reminder of the wealth it represented. "You're not seriously considering it, are you?" she asked her reflection in the steamy mirror as she dressed in her cleanest clothes. Her blue eyes stared back, hollowed by years of struggle. At 26, she had expected more from life. Art school dropout due to lack of funds, a series of minimum wage jobs that barely covered rent until the gallery she worked at closed 6 months ago. Now she lived in her car, when it wasn't in the repair shop like now, or crashed on the couches of increasingly reluctant friends. Her talent, once praised by professors, was reduced to sidewalk sketches for tourists and the occasional commissioned piece that paid for a week's food. "It's insane," she muttered, combing through her damp hair. "Completely insane. But the prospect of financial security, real security, not just making it to the next month, was a siren song she couldn't ignore. What would it mean to never worry about money again? To have a place of her own, time to create real art, maybe even open the small gallery she had always dreamed of. All it would cost was 9 months of her life and giving up a child she hadn't planned on having anyway. The thought made her stomach twist. Could she really create a life and then walk away from it? Was she capable of such detachment? Think of it as surrogacy, she reasoned with herself. People do that all the time. But this was different. This wasn't helping a loving couple unable to have children. This was a business transaction with a cold, calculating man who spoke about children like they were investments. Sarah gathered her things and left the community center, walking aimlessly through streets that had become both home and prison. The spring day was beautiful, cherry blossoms drifting down like snow, but she barely noticed. Her fingers kept returning to the business card in her pocket, tracing its sharp edges. As evening approached, she found herself outside an upscale restaurant, watching families and couples through the window. A father helped his young daughter cut her food, laughing at something she said. The simple interaction made Sarah's chest ache with a longing she couldn't articulate. What kind of father would he be? She wondered aloud. Michael Johnson didn't seem the type to laugh over dinner with a child, to play in parks or read bedtime stories. Could she really give a child to such a man? Then again, what kind of life could she offer a child right now? No stability, no security, not even a permanent address. The reality of her situation pressed down on her like a physical weight. Tomorrow she would need to find somewhere to sleep. Next week, she would need to earn enough for her car repair bill. The month after that and the one after that. The endless cycle of barely surviving stretched before her like a prison sentence. With sudden resolve, Sarah pulled out her phone, a basic model she kept charged at the library, and the business card. Before she could reconsider, she dialed the number. Johnson speaking. His voice was crisp, authoritative. "It's Sarah Williams." Her voice sounded small in comparison. "About your offer. You've decided to accept." No surprise in his tone, just cool certainty. Sarah closed her eyes, took a deep breath. "I have conditions." A pause, then, "I'm listening. I want my own space wherever I stay, privacy, and I want to be able to continue my art." Reasonable. What else? "I want to be treated with respect, not like an employee or an incubator." Of course. Was there a hint of amusement in his voice? Anything else? Sarah hesitated, then added, "I want to know that the child will be well cared for, loved, not just provided for." This time the pause was longer. "The child will want for nothing, Ms. Williams. That I can guarantee." It wasn't exactly what she had asked for, but it was probably the most she would get from him. "Then I accept." "Excellent. My driver will collect you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Where should he pick you up? The question highlighted the reality of her homelessness. The public library on 5th Street. Very well, we'll review and sign the contracts tomorrow. Good evening, Ms. Williams. The line went dead before she could respond. Sarah stared at her phone, wondering if she had just made a deal with the devil or grasped a lifeline. Either way, there was no turning back now. The Johnson estate was a modernist dream of white marble and glass, perched on a hillside overlooking the city like a watchful sentinel. As the sleek black car approached through wrought iron gates, Sarah pressed her face to the window, her few possessions clutched, in a worn backpack on her lap. "Welcome to High Point," the driver said, breaking his professional silence for the first time during the 30-minute drive. "Mr. Johnson's personal residence?" Sarah nodded, unable to form words as they curved up the immaculate driveway. Sculptures dotted the manicured landscape, abstract forms in metal and stone that probably cost more than she would have earned in a decade of gallery work. The car stopped at the entrance, where a woman in a tailored suit waited. She was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a severe bun and sharp eyes that assessed Sarah instantly. "Ms. Williams," she greeted, as the driver opened Sarah's door. "I'm Stephanie Harris, Mr. Johnson's executive assistant. Please follow me." Sarah shouldered her backpack, acutely aware of its shabbiness against the opulence surrounding her. They entered a foyer with ceilings so high they seemed to reach for the heavens, the sound of their footsteps echoing off marble floors and minimalist walls adorned with museum-quality art. "Mr. Johnson is concluding a conference call in his study," Stephanie explained, leading Sarah through the house. "He asked me to show you to your suite and explain the household protocols." "Suite?" Sarah echoed, struggling to keep up with Stephanie's brisk pace. "Yes, the East Wing has been prepared for you." They ascended a floating staircase that seemed to defy gravity, then proceeded down a long hallway with doors spaced far apart, suggesting the enormous size of the rooms behind them. "Here we are." Stephanie opened a door and gestured for Sarah to enter. The suite was larger than any apartment Sarah had ever lived in. A sitting room with plush furnishings in cream and pale blue opened to a bedroom with a king-sized bed, which in turn connected to a bathroom that featured both a walk-in shower and a soaking tub large enough for two. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city below and the mountains beyond. "The closet has been stocked with a basic wardrobe in what we estimate to be your size," Stephanie continued, opening another door to reveal clothing with tags still attached. "If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, please let me know, and alternatives will be provided." Sarah touched a silk blouse, checking the label and blanching at the price. "This is too much. Mr. Johnson was explicit that you are to have whatever you need for your comfort." Stephanie's tone was neutral, but her eyes held a hint of curiosity. "Your meals will be prepared by Chef Anton. If you have any dietary preferences or restrictions, inform him directly. Breakfast is served in the morning room from 7 to 9, lunch at 1 in the garden room or patio, weather permitting, and dinner at 7 in the formal dining room when Mr. Johnson is in residence, or wherever you prefer when he is not." The information washed over Sarah in a wave, too much to absorb at once. "And how often is Mr. Johnson in residence?" "His schedule varies. He divides his time between here, the penthouse downtown, and various international locations." Before Sarah could ask more questions, Stephanie's phone buzzed. She checked it and nodded. "Mr. Johnson will see you now. This way, please." They traversed the enormous house to a wing that clearly served as Michael's home office. Double doors. Open to a study that continued the home's aesthetic of minimalist luxury, leather, wood, and glass in perfect harmony. Michael sat behind a desk that could have doubled as a conference table, two lawyers flanking him like sentinels. "Ms. Williams," he greeted, standing, "I trust you find your accommodations satisfactory." "They're overwhelming," Sarah admitted. "Honestly." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You'll adjust. Please have a seat. We have matters to discuss." For the next 2 hours, Sarah listened as the lawyers explained the contract in excruciating detail. The medical procedures, the expectations during pregnancy, the confidentiality clauses, and most importantly, the complete surrender of parental rights upon birth. The financial compensation was even more substantial than she had imagined, enough to buy a small gallery and a comfortable apartment outright, with plenty left for living expenses for years to come. "Do you have any questions, Miss Williams?" one of the lawyers asked when they had finished. Sarah had dozens, but none that these men could answer. Instead, she asked, "May I have some time to review this alone?" "Of course," Michael replied before the lawyers could object. "Take the contract to your suite. We'll reconvene at dinner." Stephanie escorted her back to her rooms, where Sarah spent the afternoon reading every line of the 40-page document. The legal language was dense, but the message was clear. Her body would be a vessel, and once its purpose was fulfilled, she would be generously compensated and expected to disappear. It was cold, clinical, exactly what she should have expected from a man like Michael Johnson. Yet part of her had hoped for, what? Some recognition of the human element in creating a child? Some acknowledgement that this wasn't just a business transaction? At precisely 6:30, a gentle knock at her door announced Stephanie, who had come to escort her to dinner. Sarah had changed into one of the provided outfits, a simple black dress that fit as if it had been tailored for her. "You clean up nicely," Michael commented when she entered the dining room, his eyes appraising her with the same detachment he might use on a balance sheet. "Thank you," Sarah replied, taking the seat a staff member pulled out for her. "I've reviewed the contract. And I'll sign it. With one addition." She met his gaze steadily. "I want the right to know that the child is well, not to interfere, just to know they're healthy and happy." Michael considered her request as the first course was served, a delicate soup that smelled of truffles and herbs. "You would receive yearly updates until the child turns 18. No contact, just information. Would that satisfy you?" Sarah nodded, relief loosening the knot in her stomach. "Yes." "Then we have an agreement." He raised his wineglass in a toast. "Two mutually beneficial arrangements." Sarah raised her own glass, feeling as if she had just signed away more than she understood. "To new beginnings." Their glasses clinked, crystal meeting crystal, with a sound like a promise being sealed. Outside the vast windows, the sun set over the city, casting long shadows across the marble floors of a house that would be her gilded cage for the next 9 months. 6 weeks into her stay at High Point, Sarah stood before an easel in the sunroom. That had been converted to a studio at her request. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the canvas where she was attempting to capture the view of the garden. Her brush hovered, hesitant, as nausea rolled through her again. The pregnancy had been confirmed 2 weeks after her arrival, and with it came morning sickness that was hardly limited to mornings. Dr. Lambert, the discreet obstetrician hired by Michael, had assured her it would likely pass after the first trimester, but that knowledge did little to ease the current discomfort. Sarah set down her brush and took deep breaths, one hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. Though nothing showed yet, she was acutely aware of the changes within her body, the tenderness, the fatigue, the strange cravings that had the kitchen staff raising eyebrows. "Miss Williams?" Stephanie's voice called from the doorway. "Mr. Johnson has requested your presence at the medical appointment this afternoon." Sarah turned, surprised. "He's attending?" "Apparently so. The car will be ready at 2. This was unexpected. Michael had been largely absent since she signed the contract, appearing only occasionally for brief, formal interactions that usually involved inquiries about her health and whether she had everything she needed. He had shown no interest in the actual medical appointments until now. At precisely 2 o'clock, Sarah found Michael waiting in the foyer, engrossed in something on his tablet. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than a year's rent in her previous life, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. "For you're looking well," he commented, glancing up as she approached. "Appearances can be deceiving," Sarah replied with a wry smile. "I've been sick most mornings." A flicker of something, concern, crossed his face. "Has Dr. Lambert prescribed anything for that?" "Yes, but I prefer to avoid medication unless absolutely necessary." Sarah followed him to the waiting car. "I'm surprised you're coming today." Michael settled into the leather seat across from her. It's a significant appointment. The first ultrasound. The drive to the private medical facility passed in awkward silence. Sarah watched the city scroll by, wondering what Michael was thinking. Did he see her as nothing more than a walking incubator? Or was there some recognition that they were creating a life together, however clinical the method? The medical center was discreet, catering to wealthy clients who valued privacy. They were escorted immediately to a plush examination room that looked more like a hotel suite than a clinical space. Dr. Lambert, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, greeted them warmly. "Ms. Williams, Mr. Johnson, today's an exciting day. We'll get our first glimpse of your baby." Your baby. The phrase hung in the air, ambiguous in its ownership. Sarah changed into a gown behind a screen, then positioned herself on the examination table as instructed. Michael stood awkwardly by the wall, as if unsure of his role in this intimate procedure. "This will be a bit cold," Dr. Lambert warned, as she applied gel to Sarah's abdomen. The transducer moved smoothly over her skin, the doctor's eyes fixed on the screen that was angled away from Sarah's view. After a moment, the doctor's brow furrowed. "Is something wrong?" Sarah asked, anxiety immediately spiking. "Not at all," Dr. Lambert replied, adjusting something on the machine. "Actually, I'm detecting something interesting. Mr. Johnson, would you like to come closer to see?" Michael hesitated, then moved to stand beside the examination table. From this position, Sarah could see his profile as he looked at the screen, could see the moment his composed expression faltered. "Is that—" he began. "Yes," the doctor confirmed with a smile. "Two distinct heartbeats. Congratulations. You're having twins." Twins. The word echoed in Sarah's mind, reverberating like a stone dropped in still water. One child had seemed manageable, a temporary condition, a task to complete. But two babies growing inside her, two lives she would bring into the world only to surrender. "Can I see?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Lambert turned the screen, pointing out the two tiny forms, each with a flickering pulse of light that represented a beating heart. Sarah felt tears well in her eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. "They look healthy," the doctor continued, oblivious to the emotional earthquake occurring in the room. "Developing exactly as they should be at this stage." Michael had gone very still, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Twins weren't part of the plan," he said finally, his voice oddly strained. "Nature often has its own ideas," Dr. Lambert replied, with a chuckle. "But everything indicates a normal, healthy twin pregnancy." The remainder of the appointment passed in a blur for Sarah. More measurements, more assurances, prescriptions for prenatal vitamins, and recommendations for dealing with the morning sickness. Through it all, Michael remained silent. His expression, impossible to read. It wasn't until they were back in the car that he spoke again. "This changes things." Sarah looked up from the ultrasound printout she'd been staring at. "How so?" "Two children instead of one. It's unexpected." "Are you disappointed?" Sarah asked, suddenly defensive of the two lives she carried. Michael considered the question with his usual careful deliberation. "No," he said finally. "Not disappointed. Just recalibrating. Life rarely follows a perfect plan, Mr. Johnson." "Michael," he corrected absently. "Under the circumstances, I think you can call me Michael." "Michael," Sarah repeated, testing the familiar address. "Well, Michael, it seems your heirs will come with a built-in playmate." For the first time since she had met him, Michael, Johnson smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face, softening the hard lines and lighting his eyes. "So it seems, Sarah, so it seems." As the car pulled through the gates of High Point, Sarah found herself wondering what other surprises these twins might bring into their carefully structured arrangement, and whether the man beside her was capable of adapting to the messy, unpredictable nature of life and love. The 4th month of Sarah's pregnancy brought welcome relief from morning sickness, replaced by a surge of energy that had her filling canvas after canvas with vibrant landscapes and abstract expressions of her changing emotions. Her body was changing too, the gentle curve of her belly now unmistakable, forcing adjustments to the wardrobe that had been provided for her. One morning, she entered her studio to find a package waiting on her work table, wrapped in simple brown paper. Curious, she untied the string and gasped at what lay inside. A set of professional-grade paints in colors she had been longing for, but hadn't mentioned to anyone, brushes of the finest quality, and a note written in a strong, decisive hand. "For your work." Sarah ran her fingers over the paints, the gesture unexpectedly touching. She hadn't thought Michael paid any attention to her art, yet here was evidence that he had not only noticed, but had taken the time to select items that would truly matter to her. "Do you like them?" She turned to find Michael standing in the doorway, dressed more casually than she had ever seen him, in dark jeans and a light sweater. Without his usual armor of bespoke suits, he looked younger, more approachable. "They're perfect," Sarah replied honestly. "How did you know which colors?" "I observed," he said simply. "You've been mixing to achieve certain tones. These should make your work more efficient." Efficient, of course he would frame it in terms of productivity, yet there was something in his expression, a hint of uncertainty perhaps, that suggested he wanted her to be genuinely pleased, not just appreciative of the practical value. "Would you like to see what I'm working on?" Sarah offered impulsively. Michael hesitated, then nodded, stepping further into the studio. Sarah led him to her current canvas, a depiction of the estate gardens at sunset, with the mountains in the distance bathed in golden light. "You've captured it precisely," Michael commented, studying the painting. "The way the light hits the eastern face of the mountain range. It's my favorite time of day here." Sarah looked at him in surprise. "I wouldn't have thought you took the time to notice such things." Something like embarrassment crossed his face. "I notice more than people assume. I simply don't always comment." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with things unsaid. Sarah busied herself arranging her new paints, while Michael examined her other works leaning against the walls. "You're talented," he said finally. "Professionally trained?" "Art school for 2 years before money ran out." Sarah kept her tone light, but the memory still carried its sting. "I was on scholarship, but it only covered tuition, not living expenses." Michael nodded, his gaze still on her canvases. "What will you do? After, I mean." The question caught Sarah off guard. It was the first time either of them had explicitly acknowledged the future beyond her pregnancy, beyond their contract. "Open a small gallery, I think. Something focused on emerging artists, people who need a chance." She smiled faintly. "Give opportunities I wish I'd had." "A sound business model," Michael approved, "though galleries can be risky investments." "Not everything is about financial returns," Sarah countered. "Some investments pay off in different ways." Michael turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "Like children?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken complexities. Sarah placed a protective hand over her growing belly, where the twins sometimes fluttered like butterflies beneath her skin. "Children aren't investments," she said quietly. "They're people, individuals with their own paths, their own minds. You can't plan what they'll become." Michael frowned slightly. "Of course you can, with the right environment, the right education." "My parents had plans for me too," Sarah interrupted. "My father wanted me to be a doctor. My mother thought I should teach. Neither of them understood when I chose art." She met his gaze directly. "Will you understand if your children make choices you wouldn't have made for them?" The challenge in her question was unmistakable. Michael's frown deepened, but he didn't immediately dismiss her words as she had expected. "I hadn't considered that," he admitted finally. "The possibility that they might have inclinations so different from mine. They'll be their own people, Michael, not extensions of you or your legacy." He nodded slowly, absorbing this. "You've given me something to think about." Sarah picked up a brush, suddenly needing the comfort of creative work. "That's what unplanned gifts do sometimes, make us think differently." Michael watched her begin to paint, adding vibrant blues to the sky and her landscape. After a few minutes, he spoke again. "Would you join me for dinner tonight? Not in the formal dining room, there's a smaller space on the terrace that's more conducive to conversation." Sarah's brush paused mid-stroke. Was Michael Johnson actually seeking her company rather than simply checking on his investment? "I'd like that," she replied cautiously. 7 o'clock then. He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Sarah, thank you." "For what?" "For the unexpected gift of perspective." After he left, Sarah stood motionless before her canvas, brush suspended, mind racing with the implications of their exchange. For the first time since arriving at High Point, she felt like more than a vessel, more than a contract. She felt seen. With renewed energy, she dipped her brush into the crimson paint Michael had given her, adding depth and warmth to the sunset. On her canvas, much like their conversation had added unexpected dimensions to their carefully structured arrangement. By the 6th month of pregnancy, Sarah's body had transformed completely. The twins made her belly protrude prominently, and she felt their movements constantly now, kicks, hiccups, somersaults that sometimes kept her awake at night. Dr. Lambert assured her everything was progressing normally, though she cautioned that twin pregnancies often delivered earlier than single births. "We should prepare for the possibility of a delivery as early as 36 weeks, she had advised at their last appointment. The reality that the twins might arrive sooner than expected had catalyzed changes throughout High Point. A wing that had been closed was now under renovation, with workers coming and going daily, transforming it into a nursery suite. Michael had thrown himself into these preparations with unexpected enthusiasm, personally overseeing the design and selection of furniture. More surprising was the gradual shift in their relationship. What had begun as awkward dinners on the terrace had evolved into a routine of shared meals, long conversations, and even occasional laughter. Sarah found herself looking forward to evenings when Michael returned from the office, eager to share details of her day and hear about his. On a warm summer evening, they sat on the terrace after dinner, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues that Sarah had tried to capture many times but never quite mastered. Michael had loosened his tie and rolled up his shirt sleeves, small concessions to comfort that would have been unthinkable when she first met him. "The nursery colors were delivered today," Sarah mentioned, sipping her herbal tea. "The pale green is perfect, just as you suggested." Michael nodded, pleased. Gender neutral but still warm and inviting. "The furniture should arrive next week." "2 of everything," Sarah mused. 2 cribs, 2 changing tables, 2 rocking chairs. "Efficiency," Michael replied with the ghost of a smile. "Though I suspect you will still be outnumbered." Sarah caught the slip, the momentary inclusion of himself in the caretaking equation, but chose not to comment on it. Instead, she asked a question that had been growing in her mind for weeks. "Have you thought about names?" Michael looked, surprised. "Names? For the babies," Sarah clarified. "They'll need names. I assumed the hospital would require them for the birth certificates, but I haven't given it much consideration yet." He hesitated. "Do you have suggestions?" The invitation to participate in this decision startled her. According to their contract, all parental decisions were his alone. "I've always liked traditional names," she offered cautiously. "Nothing trendy that they might outgrow." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "My grandfather's name was William. A good, solid name." "William," Sarah repeated, testing it. "I like that. William Johnson. And if they're both boys?" Sarah considered this. "Perhaps James for the second, or Thomas. And if they're girls?" "Elizabeth," Sarah suggested immediately. "Classic. Timeless, with many nickname options." "Elizabeth Johnson," Michael said as if trying it out. "And the second?" Sarah smiled, feeling a connection to the babies that grew stronger each day. "What about Charlotte, after your mother?" Michael's expression changed, vulnerability flashing across his face. "You remembered. You mentioned it once, during dinner last month." Sarah had noticed how his voice softened when he spoke of his mother who had died when he was a teenager. "It's a beautiful name." "Charlotte," he repeated softly. "Yes, I think that would be fitting." A comfortable silence fell between them as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains. Stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine from the garden below. Suddenly, Sarah gasped, her hand going to her belly. "What is it?" Michael asked, instantly alert. "Should I call Dr. Lambert?" "No," Sarah laughed, reaching for his hand. "Here, feel this." Before he could object, she placed his palm against the side of her swollen belly. For a moment, nothing happened, and Sarah worried the twins had stopped their acrobatics. Then came a strong kick, unmistakable against Michael's hand. His eyes widened in astonishment. "That's Baby A, according to Dr. Lambert," Sarah explained. "The more active one. Baby B is usually quieter, but... Oh, there, did you feel that? They're both awake now." Michael didn't remove his hand, his expression transforming as he felt the lives stirring beneath his palm. For a man who controlled every aspect of his world, this direct connection to something so primal, so beyond his influence, was visibly humbling. "They're really in there," he said softly, wonder replacing his usual composure. "Two little people. Growing stronger every day," Sarah confirmed, watching his face. "With minds and personalities all their own." Michael met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. His hand remained on her belly, and she covered it with her own, a gesture both intimate and innocent. In that moment, they weren't. Employer and surrogate weren't bound by contracts and agreements, but simply two people connected by the miracle beneath their joined hands. "Thank you," Michael said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "For what?" "For sharing this with me. For..." He struggled to find words, a rare occurrence for a man usually so articulate. "For making it real." The admission cost him something, Sarah could tell. This acknowledgement that creating life was more than a business transaction, more than ensuring a legacy, was a significant step for a man who had spent decades building walls around his heart. As if sensing the significance of the moment, one of the twins kicked again, right against their hands, drawing a laugh from both of them. The sound of Michael's laughter, rare and unguarded, warmed Sarah more than the summer evening. Later, as Michael walked her to her suite, their conversation turned to practical matters: the upcoming doctor's appointment, the delivery plan, the specialized pediatrician who had been retained. Yet underneath the planning and logistics ran a current of something new and undefined, something neither of them was ready to name, but both could feel shifting between them like the babies shifting in Sarah's womb. At her door, Michael hesitated. "Sleep well, Sarah. You too, Michael." He reached out tentatively and placed his hand once more on her belly, a gentle good night to the twins. When he looked up, their eyes met, and Sarah saw something there she had never expected to see. From Michael Johnson. Uncertainty, vulnerability, and perhaps most surprising of all, tenderness. He turned and walked away before she could analyze it further, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. Sarah entered her suite and closed the door, leaning against it as she processed what had just happened. This wasn't part of the contract, she whispered to her unborn children, feeling them stir as if in response. None of this was part of the plan. Yet as she prepared for bed, she couldn't help wondering if perhaps the most meaningful things in life were those that couldn't be planned for, negotiated, or signed away, like the connection forming between two people who had intended to remain, detached, brought together by two tiny hearts beating beneath her own. The 7th month arrived with a heat wave that left Sarah uncomfortable and irritable despite High Point's excellent climate control. Her body felt unwieldy, her back constantly aching, and sleep became an elusive luxury as the twins seemed determined to practice their gymnastics routine primarily at night. Michael had been uncharacteristically absent for nearly a week, caught in a corporate crisis that required his personal attention. According to Stephanie, he had been flying between New York and London, barely stopping for rest. Sarah told herself she shouldn't miss his presence. This arrangement had never been about companionship, yet the evenings stretched long and empty without their conversations. On the 3rd evening of a particularly sweltering day, Sarah waddled onto the terrace, seeking relief in the slightly cooler night air. The city lights spread below like a reflection of the stars above, beautiful but distant. She eased herself into a lounge chair, arranging pillows to support her aching back, and closed her eyes. You should be resting inside where it's cooler. Sarah's eyes flew open to find Michael standing at the terrace entrance, his suit wrinkled from travel, dark circles under his eyes, betraying his exhaustion. "You're back," she observed unnecessarily, unable to hide her pleasure at seeing him. "Just arrived." He moved to join her, loosening his tie with a weary motion. "The crisis is contained for now." "You look terrible," Sarah said bluntly. Michael's lips twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. "Thank you for that assessment. When did you last sleep?" "Define sleep." Sarah shook her head disapprovingly. "And you lecture me about taking care of myself. The difference is that I'm not carrying 2 additional lives." Michael's gaze moved to her expanded belly, where one of the twins was visibly shifting position. "How are they?" "Active. Growing. Keeping me awake." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "Doctor, Lambert says they're right on track, though I feel the size of a house." Michael studied her face. "You're in pain." "Just the usual discomforts, my back mostly." Without asking permission, Michael moved behind her lounger and placed his hands on her shoulders, beginning a gentle but firm massage. Sarah tensed in surprise, then gradually relaxed as his strong fingers found and released knots of tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. "Where did you learn to do that?" she asked, eyes closed in bliss. "Physical therapy after a skiing accident in my 20s. His hands moved down to work on her lower back. "Is this helping?" "God, yes," Sarah murmured. "Don't stop." They fell into comfortable silence, the only sounds the distant city traffic and Sarah's occasional sighs of relief. After several minutes, Michael spoke again, his voice contemplative. "I've been thinking about what happens next." Sarah's eyes opened. "Next?" "After the birth." The reminder of their arrangement fell between them like a stone, disrupting the peaceful moment. Sarah pulled away slightly, reality intruding on their temporary intimacy. "The contract is clear about that," she said, her voice cooler than she intended. "I deliver the babies, receive payment, and leave." Michael walked around to face her, his expression troubled. "Is that still what you want?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "Want?" "I didn't think my wants were relevant to our arrangement." "They weren't," Michael acknowledged. "Initially." Sarah struggled to sit up straighter, needing to feel less vulnerable for this conversation. "And now?" Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of uncertainty she had rarely seen from him. "Things have changed." "Have they?" Sarah challenged, protective instincts flaring. "Or are you just attached to the idea of the babies, not the reality of what they'll need?" "What do you mean?" "Babies need more than financial security. Michael, they need love, attention, time, all things you've built your life around avoiding." The words spilled out before she could censor them. "Do you even know how to change a diaper? Have you ever held an infant? Do you understand what it means to be woken every 2 hours, to put someone else's needs before your own every single day?" Michael's expression hardened. "I'm capable of learning." "Learning requires humility, flexibility, patience, traits you're not exactly known for," Sarah pressed, months of uncertainty crystallizing into words. "You've built an empire on control, but children can't be controlled. They're messy and unpredictable and sometimes irrational. Can you handle that?" "You think I'm incapable of adapting?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "I think you've never had to," Sarah replied honestly. "Everything in your life is precisely arranged. Everyone follows your orders without question. These babies won't care about your net worth or your corporate takeovers. They'll just need you to be present, to be human." "And you don't believe I can do that?" Sarah sighed, suddenly exhausted by the weight of unspoken emotions. "I don't know, Michael. That's what terrifies me. I don't know what kind of father you'll be, and once I walk away, I won't be able to protect them if—" She trailed off, realizing too late what she had revealed, that she cared deeply about the twins' welfare, that the thought of leaving them was becoming increasingly painful. Michael's expression shifted from anger to something more complex. "You're becoming attached to them." It wasn't a question. Sarah placed both hands on her belly, feeling the twins move beneath her touch. "How could I not?" she whispered. "They're part of me." "That wasn't part of our agreement," Sarah laughed bitterly, "as if emotions follow contracts. You can't dictate how people feel, Michael, not even with the finest legal language money can buy." Michael paced the terrace, the controlled businessman momentarily replaced by a man grappling with unexpected complications. "What are you saying, Sarah? That you want to keep the babies? To be their mother?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Sarah closed her eyes, wrestling with emotions she had been trying to suppress for months. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "I never planned to be a mother. I'm not prepared for it, financially or otherwise. But the thought of never seeing them, never knowing them—" Her voice broke. "It's becoming unbearable." Michael stopped pacing and looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time seeing beyond the contract to the woman carrying his children. "And if there were another option?" he asked carefully. "Something between walking away entirely and traditional parenthood?" Sarah wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Like what?" "I don't know yet," Michael admitted, the words clearly difficult for a man accustomed to having all the answers. "But perhaps there's a solution we haven't considered." Before Sarah could respond, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, causing her to gasp and double over. Michael was at her side instantly. "Sarah, what is it?" "I don't know," she panted, fear replacing discomfort as the pain intensified. "Something's wrong. Call Dr. Lambert." Michael pulled out his phone and dialed, his voice commanding as he explained the situation. Within minutes, they were in his car speeding toward the private medical center, Sarah clutching his hand as contractions came with alarming frequency. "It's too early," she whispered between waves of pain. "They're not ready yet." "Everything will be fine," Michael insisted, though for once his confidence seemed forced. "The best specialists are already being called in." As they rushed through the night, city lights blurring through windows made opaque by Sarah's tears, the contract that had brought them together seemed suddenly irrelevant in the face of the very real possibility of losing the precious lives they had created. What mattered now was not who would raise the children, but whether they would have the chance to be raised at all. The last thing Sarah remembered before being whisked into the emergency room was Michael's face, stripped of its usual composure, naked with fear and something that looked remarkably like love. Sarah awoke to the steady beep of monitors and the antiseptic smell of hospital surroundings. Disoriented, she tried to sit up, only to be gently pressed back by a nurse's hand. "Easy there, Miss Williams, you need to rest." Memory flooded back, the terrace, the argument, the sudden pain. Sarah's hands flew to her stomach, finding it still swollen but perhaps slightly less so than before. "The babies," she gasped. "Are they—" "They're fine," came Michael's voice from the door side. He looked haggard, his clothes rumpled, his face unshaven. "Premature but stable." Relief washed over Sarah like a physical force. "What happened?" Dr. Lambert entered the room, chart in hand. "Preterm labor," she explained. "We managed to stop it with medication, but you'll need to remain on strict bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy." "For how long?" "Ideally at least 3 more weeks," the doctor replied. "Every day the twins remain in utero improves their chances of avoiding complications." Sarah nodded, absorbing this information. "Can I see them? Wait." She frowned, in confusion. "If they're still—" She gestured to her belly. Dr. Lambert smiled reassuringly. "The twins are still where they should be, growing inside you. But we did an ultrasound while you were sedated. Would you like to see the images?" At Sarah's eager nod, the doctor displayed the ultrasound on a tablet. There they were, 2 distinct forms, much more developed than in earlier scans, curled together in the limited space. "Baby A is a boy," Dr. Lambert pointed out, "and baby B is a girl." "William and Charlotte," Sarah whispered, glancing up at Michael, who had moved closer to her bedside. "If you still like those names," he said, quietly. "I do." Dr. Lambert excused herself, promising to return later to check on Sarah's progress. The nurse adjusted Sarah's IV, then followed, leaving them alone for the first time since the terrace. "You stayed," Sarah observed, noting Michael's rumpled appearance. "Of course I stayed." He pulled a chair closer to her bed and sat, his movements betraying exhaustion. "Sarah, about our conversation before—" "It doesn't matter now," she interrupted. "Nothing matters except keeping them safe." Michael reached for her hand, surprising her. "It does matter. You were right." Sarah blinked, uncertain she had heard correctly. Right about what? About me. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, an unconscious gesture of intimacy. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to change diapers or comfort a crying infant. I've spent my life controlling everything around me, and I can't control this. The admission clearly cost him, but he continued, each word deliberate. What I do know is that when they told me you might lose the babies, that all three of you were at risk, nothing else mattered. Not the contract, not the company, nothing. Sarah saw the truth of it in his eyes, the fear he had experienced, the priorities that had shifted in those critical hours. So what happens now? She asked softly. Now you rest, Michael replied. You focus on keeping yourself and the twins healthy. And he hesitated. I learn. About babies, about parenting, about all the things I should have been preparing for instead of just renovating nurseries and buying equipment. Sarah smiled despite her exhaustion. Michael Johnson admitting he has something to learn. The world must be ending. A ghost of his former smile touched his lips. Perhaps it is. Or perhaps a new one is beginning. Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah observed a transformation in Michael that would have seemed impossible months earlier. True to his word, he embarked on an intensive self-education program, approaching parenthood with the same determination he brought to business acquisitions. Books on child development appeared on her bedside table. Michael attended parenting classes, returning with detailed notes and thoughtful questions. He even spent time observing in the hospital's neonatal unit, learning the practical skills of baby care from experienced nurses. Most surprisingly, he arranged his schedule to spend the majority of each day with Sarah at the hospital, working remotely when necessary, but prioritizing their time together. They watched documentaries on child development, discussed parenting, philosophies, and gradually, cautiously, began to talk about the future, not as separate individuals bound by a contract, but as two people facing a shared challenge. On a quiet afternoon during her 3rd week of bed rest, Sarah was sketching on a pad Michael had brought her when he entered with a legal envelope. "What's that?" she asked, setting aside her drawing. Michael sat on the edge of her bed, his expression serious. "Our contract." Sarah tensed. "What about it?" "I think it needs to be revised." He opened the envelope and removed the document that had defined their relationship for months. Or perhaps replaced entirely. Replaced with what? With something that acknowledges what's actually happening, not what we planned. Michael met her gaze directly. "Sarah, I don't want you to walk away after the twins are born." Her heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I want you in their lives, in our lives." He took a deep breath. "In my life." Sarah stared at him, searching for signs this was another business proposition, another arrangement of convenience. Instead, she found vulnerability and hope in his eyes. "Is this because of the babies?" she asked carefully. "Because you need help with them?" "No," Michael replied firmly. "Though I certainly do need help with them. This is because these past months have changed me." "You've changed me." He reached for her hand. "I never expected to feel this way. I thought emotions were a liability, relationships a distraction. You've shown me how wrong I was." Sarah hardly dared to believe what she was hearing. "Michael, if this is some kind of gratitude or obligation—" "It's neither," he interrupted. "It's much simpler and much more complex than that." His fingers tightened around hers. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Sarah Williams, and I suspect that terrifies you as much as it terrifies me." The admission hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Sarah felt tears well in her eyes, emotion overwhelming her usual composure. "I swore I wouldn't get attached," she whispered. "To the babies or to you, it was supposed to be just a transaction." "Life rarely follows the contracts we try to impose on it," Michael said, echoing her own words from months ago. "DT. Sometimes it offers something better than we planned." Sarah looked down at their joined hands, then at her swollen belly where their children grew. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I've been on my own for so long. I don't know how to be part of a family." "Neither do I," Michael acknowledged. "We'd have to learn together. And what about the contract, the payment?" Michael held up the document and then, with deliberate care, tore it in half and then in half again. "I can think of better investments than paying you to leave us." The symbolism of the gesture wasn't lost on Sarah. For a man whose life had been built on binding agreements and careful negotiations, destroying a contract was an act of profound faith. "So what now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now we write our own terms," Michael replied, "day by day." Before Sarah could respond, a familiar sensation rippled across her abdomen. Stronger this time, unmistakable. Her eyes widened. "Michael," she said urgently, "I think it's time." Hours later, in a delivery room filled with specialists, William Michael Johnson entered the world with a robust cry, followed 7 minutes later by his sister, Charlotte Sarah Johnson. Both tiny but perfect, they were whisked to waiting incubators, their early arrival requiring special care but presenting no serious complications. When Sarah was finally allowed to see them, Michael wheeled her to the NICU, where 2 transparent pods contained their children. Tubes and monitors made the babies look fragile, but the doctor assured them both twins were doing remarkably well for their gestational age. "They're fighters," the neonatologist said with approval. "Strong like their parents. The phrase sent a wave of emotion through Sarah as she reached through the incubator's port to touch William's perfect, tiny hand. His fingers instinctively curled around hers, a grip surprisingly strong for one so small. Beside her, Michael was having a similar moment with Charlotte, his large hand made to look enormous by comparison with his daughter's miniature form. The expression on his face was one Sarah had never seen before, awe, terror, and overwhelming love combined. "They're perfect," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," Sarah agreed, watching as William yawned, his face scrunching, in a way that already reminded her of Michael when he was concentrating. "They are." As they sat together beside their children's incubators, the future stretched before them, uncertain, unplanned, but filled with possibilities neither had imagined when they first entered into their contract. The terms had changed. The agreement evolved into something no lawyer could have drafted, no signature could have validated. In place of a business arrangement, they had found something far more valuable, the beginnings of a family, bound not by legal obligation, but by the stronger, more enduring ties of love and shared purpose. 3 months after the twins' birth, High Point had transformed from a showcase of minimalist luxury into a home-bearing evidence of the new lives it contained. Designer throw pillows shared space with burp cloths, crystal vases stood alongside. Bottles of formula and the pristine white furniture now featured protective covers in practical washable fabrics. Sarah sat in the nursery's rocking chair, Charlotte asleep against her shoulder, watching as Michael attempted to change William's diaper on the changing table. His forehead creased in concentration. He navigated the process with the same focused attention he might give to a complex corporate merger. "You're getting better at that," Sarah observed, hiding a smile as William kicked his legs energetically, making the task more challenging. "Practice makes perfect," Michael replied, his tone serious but eyes warm with humor. "Though I'm beginning to think he does this deliberately to test me." "Like father, like son," Sarah teased. "He's already learning to negotiate." Michael secured the fresh diaper and lifted William into his arms, the contrast between his large hands and the baby's tiny body still striking, even after weeks of such interactions. William gurgled contentedly, tiny fists waving in the air. "I think he's hungry again," Michael said, recognizing the signs that had once been completely foreign to him. Sarah nodded, shifting Charlotte to a more comfortable position. "They're both eating more lately. Dr. Morgan says it's a growth spurt." They moved in practice synchrony downstairs to the family room that had been adapted for the twins' needs, with comfortable feeding chairs and all necessary supplies within reach. As Sarah settled to nurse Charlotte, Michael prepared a bottle for William, testing the temperature on his wrist before sitting opposite her. "The contractors finished the gallery space downtown," he mentioned as William began to drink eagerly. "The renovations came out exactly as you specified." Sarah looked up in surprise. "Already? I thought they weren't scheduled to complete until next month." "I may have offered some incentives for early completion," Michael admitted. I thought you might like to see it soon. Start planning the installation before the opening." Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude. Despite the chaos of new parenthood, Michael had continued moving forward with the gallery they had discussed, her dream taking tangible form even as they adjusted to life with the twins. "That's wonderful," she said softly, "though I'm not sure how I'll manage exhibition planning with these two demanding my attention." "We'll figure it out," Michael assured her. "Stephanie has researched several highly qualified nannies for when we need additional help, and I've rearranged my schedule to work from home 3 days a week." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "The mighty CEO working from home? Your board must be having fits." "They'll adapt," Michael replied, with the confidence of a man accustomed to setting terms rather than accepting them. "As will my executive team. The company survived while I was in London and New York. It can survive my spending mornings with my family." Family. The word still sent a thrill through Sarah each time Michael used it. Their relationship had evolved organically since the twins' birth, from cautious co-parents to something deeper, built on shared challenges and small triumphs. Michael had moved her things to the master suite without fanfare, simply stating that it made more sense for them to be together when the twins woke at night. They had fallen into domesticity with surprising ease, learning each other's rhythms, alongside their children's. "I've been thinking," Michael said, burping William with newfound expertise, "about taking some time away, just the 4 of us." "A vacation?" Sarah couldn't hide her surprise. "With 3-month-old twins? More?" "Of a change of scene, the house in the mountains. It's peaceful there, private. We could have help come with us, of course, but it would give us time away from the constant interruptions here." Sarah considered the proposal. They had barely left High Point since bringing the twins home from the hospital, their world contracting to the immediate needs of newborns and recovery. The prospect of mountains, fresh air, and uninterrupted time together was appealing, if daunting with infants. "It sounds wonderful," she admitted, "and terrifying." Michael smiled, the expression now coming more naturally to him than it had months ago. "Most worthwhile things are a bit of both, I've found." Later that evening, after the twins were settled in their cribs, Sarah sat on the terrace that had become their favorite spot for quiet moments. The autumn air carried a hint of coolness, and she wrapped a cashmere throw around her shoulders as she gazed at the city lights below. Michael joined her, carrying 2 cups of herbal tea. "They're both asleep for now. Miracle of miracles." Sarah accepted the tea gratefully. "Though I give it an hour tops." Michael sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I received the amended birth certificates today," he mentioned, his tone casual but eyes watchful. "With your name listed as mother." Sarah nodded, emotion tightening her throat. The legal process of establishing her maternal rights had been Michael's initiative, his gift to her after the birth, ensuring that she was recognized not as a surrogate, but as the twins' mother in every sense. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For everything." Michael set down his tea and turned to face her fully. "Sarah, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. "Yes? These past months have been transformative. I came into this arrangement thinking I needed an heir for practical reasons, continuation of a legacy, someone to inherit what I've built. What I've found instead is so much more valuable." He took her hands in his. "You and the twins have given me a family, something I never thought I wanted or needed." Sarah smiled, squeezing his hands. "You've given us quite a bit yourself." "Not enough," Michael said, his expression suddenly serious. "Not yet." Before Sarah could ask what he meant, Michael released her hands and reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it, revealing a stunning but understated diamond ring. "This isn't part of any contract or arrangement," he said quietly. "This is simply me, asking if you would consider making our family official in every way. Sarah Williams, will you marry me?" Sarah stared at the ring, then at the man holding it, the man who had begun as her employer, become her co-parent, and somehow, against all odds, captured her heart in the process. Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming joy. You do realize this completely violates the terms of our original agreement, she teased, her voice wavering with emotion. Michael's smile deepened. I'm prepared to negotiate new terms, preferably lifetime ones. In that case, Sarah replied, my answer is yes. As Michael slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into a tender kiss that promised much more, Sarah marveled at the journey that had brought them here. What had begun as a cold business transaction had transformed into the warmest, most genuine connection either of them had ever known. Through the baby monitor on the table came the soft sounds of William stirring, soon to be followed by Charlotte, if their pattern held true. Parenthood called as it would countless times in the years to come, but now they would answer it together, partners in every sense, bound not by a contract of convenience, but by the stronger, more enduring bonds of love. The mountain house proved to be exactly what they needed, a sanctuary of pine-scented air and panoramic views, far from the demands of the city, located on a private ridge with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the majesty of the surrounding. Peaks, it was more rustic than High Point, but no less luxurious. 2 weeks into their stay, Sarah sat on the wraparound deck, sketching the landscape while the twins napped inside under the watchful eye of Mrs. Reynolds, the experienced nanny who had accompanied them. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke from the fireplace inside, and golden aspen leaves shimmered in the afternoon sun. You seem peaceful, Michael observed, emerging from the house with 2 steaming mugs. He handed one to Sarah and settled into the adjacent chair, his usual formal attire replaced by jeans and a soft sweater that made him look younger, more relaxed. I am, Sarah admitted, accepting the hot chocolate gratefully. I didn't realize how much I needed this change of scene. Michael nodded, gazing out at the mountains. There's clarity here, perspective. They sat in comfortable silence, a luxury that had become precious since the twins' arrival. At 5 months old, William and Charlotte were developing distinct personalities. William serious and observant like his father, Charlotte expressive and determined like her mother. Both were fascinatingly individual, defying any expectations their parents might have had. I had an email from the gallery manager we hired, Sarah mentioned, setting aside her sketchbook. The first exhibition is coming together beautifully. They've secured commitments from all the artists we discussed. That's excellent news, Michael replied, though I sense a but coming. Sarah smiled at how well he had learned to read. But I'm having mixed feelings about the timing. The opening is scheduled for when the twins will be 8 months old. I'm not sure I'm ready to be away from them that much, even for something I've dreamed about for so long. Michael considered this, his approach to problem-solving evident in his thoughtful expression. What if you weren't away from them? What if we created a space at the gallery where they could be nearby while you work? A nursery at an art gallery, Sarah laughed softly. That's hardly conventional. When have we ever been conventional? Michael countered with a raised eyebrow. Besides, it's your gallery. You make the rules. Your gallery? The word still gave Sarah a thrill. The Sarah Williams Gallery was becoming reality, not just a dream, but a tangible space where emerging artists would find the opportunities she had once longed for herself. It could work, she acknowledged. A private space upstairs, maybe. Somewhere the nanny could bring them when they need me, but separated enough that it remains professional. Exactly. Michael took a sip of his chocolate. Parenthood doesn't mean abandoning your other passions, Sarah. It just means finding new ways to integrate them. Sarah studied him over the rim of her mug, marveling at the evolution she had witnessed. When they first met, Michael had spoken of children as legacy bearers, extensions of himself and his achievements. Now he spoke of nurturing their individual paths, of balancing personal fulfillment with parental responsibility. You've changed so much, she observed. For the better, I hope. Definitely for the better. Sarah reached across to take his hand, though I suspect you're still a terror in the boardroom. Michael's lips quirked. Some things don't change. Completely. Speaking of which, there's a business matter I'd like to discuss with you. Sarah's curiosity piqued at his suddenly more formal tone. Oh? I've been reviewing our financial arrangements, he began, setting down his mug. Currently, the gallery, Your personal accounts and the trusts for the twins are all separate entities. Yes, that seemed most practical, Sarah agreed, wondering where this was leading. With our marriage approaching, I've been considering a more comprehensive structure. Michael's expression was serious, but his eyes gentle. I'd like to establish a joint ownership of all our assets. Sarah blinked in surprise. For a man who had built his life on control and ownership, this was no small proposal. Michael, that's not necessary. What's yours is yours. What's mine is ours, he interrupted firmly. Sarah, I know you didn't fall in love with me for my money. I trust you completely, and I want our partnership to be equal in every sense. Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes, unexpected emotion welling up at this ultimate demonstration of trust from a man who had once approached their relationship as a business transaction. Are you sure? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael nodded, reaching into his pocket to produce a document, a habit he hadn't entirely abandoned. I had the papers drawn up already, but of course, you should have your own counsel review them. Sarah accepted the envelope but didn't open it. Instead, she set it aside and moved to perch on the arm of Michael's chair, bringing her hands to either side of his face. I don't need to review anything, she said softly. I trust you too. She leaned down to kiss him, a gesture that had become both familiar and thrilling. Michael pulled her gently onto his lap, deepening the kiss as his arms encircled her waist. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, the love between them was palpable. Not the whirlwind passion of romance novels, but something steadier, more enduring, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. From inside the house came the distinctive cry that signaled Charlotte had awakened from her nap, soon followed by William's softer vocalizations. Sarah smiled against Michael's lips. Duty calls, she murmured. Always at the most inconvenient moments, Michael replied, though his expression held nothing but affection as he helped her to her feet. They walked hand in hand into the house, where Mrs. Reynolds was already tending to the awakened twins. Charlotte immediately reached for Sarah, her tiny face lighting up with recognition, while William gurgled happily at the sight of his father, arms outstretched. As they settled on the plush rug before the fireplace, babies in their laps and toys scattered around them, Sarah felt a contentment so complete it almost frightened her. From homelessness to this abundant life, from isolation to family, the journey had been as improbable as it was precious. Penny for your thoughts, Michael said, noticing her contemplative expression. Sarah watched as William concentrated intently on the wooden block in his hands, his little brow furrowed exactly, like Michael's did when tackling a complex problem. I was just thinking about contracts, she replied, how the most important ones are never written down. Michael followed her gaze to their son, then to their daughter, who was happily drooling on a teething ring. The ones written on the heart, he agreed quietly. Outside, the mountain shadows lengthened as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Inside, surrounded by the family that had come together in the most unexpected of ways, Sarah and Michael exchanged a look of profound understanding, a wordless acknowledgement of how far they had come and the journey that still lay ahead. One, they would travel together, bound by promises far stronger than any legal document could create. The wedding was held at High Point on a perfect spring day, exactly 1 year after their first meeting. Unlike the lavish society events Michael might once have favored, this was an intimate gathering of close friends and the few family members each could claim. The twins, now 10 months old and recently mastering the art of crawling, were the stars of the ceremony, dressed in miniature formal wear that drew coos from even the most reserved guests. Sarah stood before the full-length mirror in what had become their bedroom, hardly recognizing herself in the elegant ivory gown that complemented her figure without overwhelming it. Her hair was arranged in a simple updo adorned with small white flowers, and around her neck hung a pendant Michael had given her that morning, a heart-shaped diamond surrounded by 2 smaller stones. One for each of our children, he had explained as he fastened it around her neck. The 3 greatest gifts in my life. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called, expecting the wedding planner with another question about the proceedings. Instead, Stephanie entered, elegant in a navy dress that complemented her silver hair. Over the past year, Michael's once intimidating assistant had become something of a surrogate mother to Sarah, offering guidance and support as she navigated her new life. "You look beautiful," Stephanie said, her usual efficiency softened by genuine warmth. "I've never seen you so radiant." "Thank you," Sarah replied, smoothing the silk of her gown nervously. "I can hardly believe this is happening." Stephanie moved to adjust a flower in Sarah's hair. "I can," she said simply. "I've worked with Michael for 15 years. I've seen him build an empire through sheer will and determination, but I've never seen him truly happy until you and the twins came into his life." Sarah met the older woman's gaze in the mirror. "Sometimes I still feel like I'll wake up and be back on that sidewalk with my sketchpad, and all of this will have been a dream." "Not a dream," Stephanie assured her. "Just proof that life sometimes has better plans than the ones we make for ourselves." She checked her watch, ever the efficient timekeeper. "It's almost time. Are you ready?" Sarah took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Yes, I'm ready." The ceremony was held in the garden, where spring blossoms created a natural cathedral of color and fragrance. Michael waited beneath an arch entwined with roses and ivy, looking more handsome than Sarah had ever seen him in his tailored suit, his expression transforming as she appeared at the end of the aisle. William and Charlotte watched from the front row, perched on Mrs. Reynolds's lap, occasionally uttering excited babbles that made the guests smile. As Sarah and Michael exchanged vows, promises crafted from their hearts rather than traditional recitations, William managed to escape his minder and crawled determinedly toward his parents, causing a ripple of laughter when he reached Michael's polished shoes and pulled himself up to stand, tiny hands clutching his father's pant leg. Without missing a beat, Michael lifted his son into his arms, continuing his vows with William settled against his chest. The moment captured perfectly the spirit of their union, not just two people joining their lives, but a family being formally celebrated. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Michael kissed Sarah with a tenderness that belied the strength of his emotion, William still in his arms. Charlotte, not to be outdone, squirmed free from Mrs. Reynolds and crawled toward them, demanding to be included. Sarah bent to scoop her up, and their first official moment as a married couple was shared with their children, exactly as it should be. The reception flowed with warmth and laughter, intimate enough that the newlyweds could speak personally with each guest. As evening approached, the gallery opening that had been scheduled to coincide with their wedding day began downtown, allowing their celebration to expand to include the artistic community Sarah was building. The Sarah Williams Gallery gleamed with fresh paint and strategic lighting, showcasing the work of 7 emerging artists Sarah had personally selected for their vision and talent. The exhibit space had been transformed from an abandoned warehouse into a sophisticated venue that maintained its industrial character, while providing the perfect backdrop for contemporary art. When Sarah and Michael arrived, still in their wedding attire, a cheer went up from the assembled artists and art lovers. The twins had been taken home by Mrs. Reynolds, allowing the couple a few hours to celebrate this professional milestone. "I'm so proud of you," Michael murmured as they moved through the gallery, greeting guests and admiring the displayed works. "This is entirely your vision come to life." Sarah squeezed his hand gratefully. "With your support, I couldn't have done this without you." "You would have found a way," Michael countered with absolute certainty. "It just might have taken longer." As they paused before a particularly striking abstract piece, the artist, a young woman with vibrant blue hair and an intense gaze, approached them nervously. "Ms. Williams, Mrs. Johnson," she began, fidgeting with her sleeve. "Sarah." "Please," Sarah corrected gently. "Sarah, I just wanted to thank you. Before you found my work, I was ready to give up. 3 galleries had rejected me, and I was working double shifts at a cafe just to afford paint." Her eyes shone with emotion. "You didn't just give me wall space, you gave me hope." Sarah felt her own eyes fill with tears. "Your talent deserves to be seen, Eliza. I'm just fortunate to be in a position to help make that happen." After Eliza moved away to speak with interested collectors, Michael pulled Sarah slightly aside. "That's your legacy," he said quietly. "Not just the children, though they're miraculous, but this, giving others the chance you once needed yourself. It's extraordinary." Sarah looked around the gallery, at the dreams taking flight on its walls, at the community forming among artists and appreciators, and felt a sense of fulfillment she had once thought impossible. "We both found our way to meaning, didn't we?" she reflected. "You through family, me through this. And both of us through love," Michael added, his arm circling her waist. "The one variable I never accounted for in my plans." As the evening wound down, they slipped away from the still bustling gallery, eager to return home to their children. The car moved through city streets toward High Point, and Sarah leaned against Michael's shoulder, exhausted but deeply content. "A year ago today I was drawing on a sidewalk, wondering where I would sleep that night," she mused. "Now I'm a wife, a mother, a gallery owner. And I'm a completely different man than I was when I spotted you that day," Michael replied, his fingers intertwining with hers. "A better one, I hope." "The best man I know," Sarah assured him, lifting their joined hands to press a kiss to his knuckles. "My husband." The word felt both strange and perfect on her lips, a title that encompassed so much more than a legal designation. As High Point appeared on the horizon, its lights glowing welcomingly in the spring darkness, Sarah felt the final pieces of her new reality settle into place. They had begun with a contract, a cold arrangement of convenience that had somehow, against all odds, blossomed into the warmest and most genuine love either had ever known. From transaction to transformation, from business to family, their journey had defied expectation at every turn, teaching them both that the most valuable things in life could never be bought, sold, or stipulated in legal terms. They were bound, now not by signatures on paper, but by the invisible, unbreakable threads of love, commitment, and shared purpose, a contract of the heart that would endure far beyond any document ever could. 5 years passed in a blur of growth and change. The twins celebrated their 5th birthday with a garden party at High Point, surrounded by friends from preschool and the various activities that now filled their busy young lives. William, serious and methodical like his father, but with his mother's artistic eye, had developed a fascination with building things, structures that grew increasingly complex as his small hands gained dexterity. Charlotte, fearless and expressive, moved through the world with confident curiosity, her father's determination paired with her mother's creativity, making her a natural leader among her peers. Sarah watched them from the terrace as they directed their friends in some elaborate game involving the playhouse Michael had commissioned for their birthday, a miniature replica of High Point that included working lights and child-sized furniture. "They're thriving," Michael observed, joining her with 2 glasses of champagne. "Dr. Winters says William's aptitude for spatial reasoning is exceptional for his age. And Charlotte's vocabulary continues to impress her teachers," Sarah added, accepting the glass gratefully. "Though they've suggested she might consider letting other children offer answers occasionally." Michael chuckled, his laugh coming more easily now than it had in the early days of their relationship. "She comes by that honestly. Neither of her parents has ever been particularly inclined to stay silent." They clinked glasses in a quiet toast, watching as Mrs. Reynolds supervised the distribution of cake to excited 5-year-olds. The trusted nanny had become part of their family, her steady presence a comfort through the chaotic early years of parenthood, and now a valued support as Sarah divided her time between family and the gallery, which had expanded to a second location in New York. "I received an interesting proposal today," Michael mentioned, his tone casual but eyes watchful. "A development project downtown in the Arts District." Sarah raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Over the years, Michael had gradually shifted the focus of his business interests, becoming increasingly involved in urban renewal projects that prioritize communities over pure profit. This evolution had surprised his board, but ultimately proven successful, both financially and in terms of the company's public image. "What kind of development?" she asked. "Mixed use, affordable housing combined with studio spaces for artists, a community center, maybe a small performance venue." Michael's expression grew more animated as he described the vision. "The interesting part is the location." "Where is it?" "The block where we first met." His eyes held hers meaningfully. "Including that sidewalk where you were drawing." Sarah's breath caught, memories flooding back of that day that had changed everything. The struggling artist, the successful businessman, an outrageous proposal that had somehow led to the life they now shared. "That's poetic," she managed. "Finally." "I thought so." Michael set down his glass, turning to face her fully. "I'd like you to be part of it, Sarah. Not just as my wife, but as a partner in the project. Your insight into what artists truly need, combined with my development experience, we could create something truly transformative." Sarah considered the proposal, touched by the symmetry of it. "Full circle," she murmured. "From that sidewalk to creating opportunities for others like me." "Exactly." Michael took her hands in his. "What do you think?" Before Sarah could respond, William and Charlotte broke away from their friends and raced toward them, faces smeared with cake frosting, and eyes bright with excitement. "Mommy! Daddy!" Charlotte called, her voice carrying across the lawn. "Come see what we made." "It's a surprise," William added more solemnly. "You have to close your eyes." Michael and Sarah exchanged amused glances, allowing themselves to be led by their children's small, insistent hands. With eyes dutifully closed, they followed the twins' directions until they were positioned somewhere in the garden. "Okay, open," Charlotte commanded. They opened their eyes to find a makeshift art display, drawings pinned to a clothesline, stretched between two trees. Each picture showed their family in the children's distinctive styles, William's precise architectural approach, and Charlotte's expressive, colorful interpretation. "We made a family gallery," William explained seriously. "Like Mommy's, but just for us." "Ms. Reynolds helped with the string," Charlotte added, "but we did all the drawings ourselves." Sarah knelt to examine the artwork, her heart swelling with pride and love. Each picture captured something essential about their family: Michael's protective presence, Sarah's nurturing energy, the bonds between siblings, the safety and joy of their shared life. "These are beautiful," she said, gathering both children into a hug. "The best art I've ever seen." Michael joined them, completing the family circle. "I think they have your talent, Sarah." "And your vision," she replied, meeting his gaze over their children's heads. Later that night, after the party had ended and the twins were asleep, exhausted from excitement and sugar, Sarah and Michael retreated to their favorite spot on the terrace. The city spread below them, lights twinkling like earthbound stars, while above, the moon cast silver light across the garden where their children had played. "I've been thinking about your proposal," Sarah said, curling into the crook of Michael's arm as they shared a lounger, "for the Arts District development. And I'd like to expand it," she replied, "beyond studio spaces and housing. What if we included a school? A place where talented kids without financial resources could receive arts education, mentoring, maybe even scholarships for college." Michael considered this, his business mind immediately calculating possibilities and challenges. "It would require additional funding, but it's doable. We could establish a foundation, perhaps." "The Johnson Williams Foundation for the Arts," Sarah suggested, testing the name, "creating pathways that I wish had existed when I was struggling." "It's perfect." Michael pressed a kiss to her temple. "You know, when I first saw you on that sidewalk, I thought I was the one offering you an opportunity. I never imagined you were actually offering me one, the opportunity to become the man I was meant to be." Sarah turned in his arms to face him, her hand coming to rest on his cheek. "We saved each other, I think, and now we can help save others." "Through love," Michael agreed, covering her hand with his own. "The most powerful force I've ever encountered, more powerful than money, more enduring than any empire." As they sealed this understanding with a kiss, the moon cast their shadows on the terrace floor. Two figures who had begun as strangers with a contract and become partners in the truest sense, bound by love, family, and a shared vision for giving back the blessings they had found in each other. 10 years to the day after Michael first approached Sarah on that fateful sidewalk, they stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Johnson Williams Arts Center. The complex encompassed an entire city block in the once neglected arts district, which now thrived with galleries, cafes, and creative businesses. At the center of the development stood a modern building of glass and sustainable materials, housing studios, classrooms, exhibition spaces, and a theater. Adjacent was an apartment complex offering affordable housing to artists and their families, and beyond that, a public park featuring sculptures created by students from the center's programs. William and Charlotte, now 15 and poised on the edge of adolescence, stood beside their parents, matching expressions of pride on their young faces. William, already as tall as Sarah and growing more like Michael in appearance each day, wore a suit for the occasion, his natural dignity making him appear older than his years. Charlotte, vibrant and stylish, had designed the commemorative T-shirts worn by the center's first class of scholarship students, 20 talented teenagers from underprivileged backgrounds who would receive comprehensive arts education and mentoring. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor announced to the gathered crowd, "it is my honor to introduce the founders of this remarkable institution, Michael and Sarah Johnson." Applause rippled through the audience as Michael stepped to the microphone, his presence commanding as always, though tempered now with the warmth that 10 years of family life had cultivated. "Thank you for joining us on this special day," he began. "What you see before you is more than buildings and programs. It's a testament to transformation, of a neighborhood of young lives, and of two people who found each other in the most unexpected of circumstances." He gestured to Sarah to join him, and she stepped forward, taking his hand. "My wife Sarah is the true visionary behind this center. 10 years ago, she sat on a sidewalk, not far from where we stand, creating art. Despite having no resources, no support, no certainty for her future, today she ensures that other artists won't face those same obstacles alone." Sarah squeezed his hand gratefully before addressing the crowd herself. "This center represents our belief that talent deserves nurturing, regardless of economic circumstances. Each student who passes through these doors will find not just education, but community, opportunity, and the freedom to develop their unique voice." William and Charlotte joined their parents at the podium, completing the family picture. Charlotte, never shy about public speaking, added her own thoughts. "Our parents have taught us that true success isn't measured by what you have, but by what you give," she stated with conviction beyond her years. "This center is their way of giving back the chances they received." William, quieter but equally passionate, concluded, "And it's our family's commitment that this legacy will continue for generations to come." As the ribbon was cut to enthusiastic applause, Sarah felt the weight of the moment, the beautiful culmination of a journey that had begun with a desperate woman, a calculated businessman, and an outrageous proposal. The official ceremonies gave way to a celebration that filled the center's courtyard. Students displayed their work, local musicians performed, and the community that would benefit from the center's programs mingled with donors, politicians, and arts advocates who had supported its creation. "Your vision has become reality," Michael murmured to Sarah as they watched the twins give improvised tours to interested visitors, Charlotte gesturing expressively, while William provided precise details about the center's design and functionality. "Our vision," Sarah corrected, leaning into his embrace. "We built this together, just as we built our family." Michael smiled, the expression now as natural to him as the serious demeanor that had once been his constant companion. "Speaking of family, have you noticed William with Eliza's daughter? I believe he's developing his first crush." Sarah followed his gaze to where their son was showing a teenage girl with her mother's artistic blue hair, the architectural features of the main building, his usual composure slightly compromised by obvious admiration. "Life is full of beautiful symmetry," she observed. "Eliza was my first gallery artist, and now her daughter might be William's first love." "Artistic temperaments clearly run in both families," Michael agreed. "Charlotte has been discussing advanced placement art courses with her school counselor. She wants to apply to art schools eventually." "Does that concern you?" Sarah asked, knowing how much importance Michael had once placed on practical career paths. "Not at all," he replied without hesitation. "She should follow her passion, wherever it leads. Both of them should." As the celebration continued around them, Sarah and Michael drifted toward a quiet corner of the courtyard, where a small bronze sculpture stood, a replica of the sketch Sarah had been working on the day they met now, transformed into 3 dimensions and serving as the center's symbol. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had driven past me that day?" Sarah asked, tracing the sculpture's flowing lines. "If you had never stopped?" Michael considered the question with the thoughtfulness that characterized him even now. "I believe we would have found each other somehow," he said finally. "Perhaps not as quickly or as directly, but some connections are inevitable. The famous Michael Johnson, believer in fate," Sarah teased gently. "I remember when you believed only in contracts and control. I've learned a few things since then," he acknowledged with a smile. "Primarily that the most valuable aspects of life can't be contracted or controlled. They can only be cherished." Sarah reached up to touch his face, still handsome after a decade together, now marked with subtle lines that spoke of laughter and experience, rather than strain and isolation. "I love you, Michael Johnson," she said simply. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "And I love you, Sarah Johnson," he replied, covering her hand with his own, "for teaching me what that word truly means." As they sealed this affirmation, with a kiss, their children approached with friends in tow, the moment of privacy giving way to the joyful chaos of family life. Together, they moved through the celebration, greeting guests and sharing the story of the center's creation, their intertwined hands a visible symbol of the partnership that had made it all possible. Later that night, after the twins had gone to bed with excited chatter about the day's events still on their lips, Sarah and Michael returned to their favorite terrace at High Point. The city spread below them, as it always had, but now with the addition of the Arts Center's distinctive silhouette among the buildings, illuminated softly against the night sky. "A perfect day," Sarah sighed contentedly, nestling against Michael's side. "A perfect decade," he amended, his arms secure around her shoulders, "though not without its challenges." Sarah nodded, thinking of the difficult moments they had weathered. Together, health scares, business setbacks, the inevitable conflicts of any relationship, particularly one that had begun under such unusual circumstances. "The challenges made us stronger," she observed. "They forced us to choose each other again and again." "The best choice I've ever made," Michael affirmed. "From contract to covenant, from arrangement to love. Who could have predicted such a transformation?" As the night deepened around them, stars emerging like dreams taking shape, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey they had shared. From a desperate woman with nothing but talent and determination to a fulfilled artist, mother, and philanthropist. From a calculating businessman seeking an heir to a devoted father and husband who had found purpose beyond ambition. Their story had begun with a proposal as cold as business and blossomed into a love as warm as summer, proving that sometimes the most beautiful creations arise from the most unlikely beginnings. The contract that had once defined their relationship had long since been replaced by something far more powerful and enduring, a commitment written not on paper, but on their hearts, a legacy not of wealth or status, but of love, compassion, and the courage to grow beyond one's limitations. In the quiet of the night, surrounded by the home they had built together, Sarah and Michael Johnson held each other close, grateful for the unexpected turns of fate that had transformed a simple business arrangement into the most profound and precious contract of all, the promise to love, honor, and cherish not just for a term of years, but for a lifetime and beyond.